You're on.
Today, apparently, this Angular thing, like, people use that or something. It's relevant. I don't know. I've never heard of it.
Little conference they went to.
So, for those that are new, to get your bearings, the bathrooms are right over there. So yeah, just a little bit about the user group. It was founded about 5 years ago, and the goal of the user group is to promote the software development community out in Henry County. Our sponsors this month are Follett, as always, for the space and hope getting in. They're always a big help to us. And also Follett sponsored the food this month. So thanks, Follett. Our other main sponsor is Veritas, and they sponsor our meetup.com membership, which is helpful, obviously, organizing it. So, yeah, so this week, I'm super excited about the Angular talk, and next month don't have a talk lined up yet. I'm wondering if lightning talks would be a good idea. So if you're interested in giving a lightning talk, like a, I don't know, 5 to 15-minute talk, let myself know or Mike Kelly, and we'll get on the agenda. So yeah, I'd like to introduce Dave and Dave. I used to work at Follett, and I worked with them, and they're both excellent engineers, and super excited that they were willing to, let us all know what they learned from going to the ng-conf. So I hand it over to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Are you going to have that come up and things so they know? Welcome, everyone. My name's Dave Lavin.
Dave Chwalisz.
Dave Chwalisz. We're the Dave Show. All right. How these computers work?
You want me to run them all?
I think we're good. All right. So we, amongst a few others from Follett here, got the opportunity to go to ng-conf. First question might be, what is ng-conf? And where does ng come from? Well, ng-conf, is a conference for the AngularJS framework for JavaScript, which how many have been exposed to that and know what that is? How many have not done anything with that before? Okay, good, because we did some introductory slides in here, and I wasn't sure if I should skip through them or not, but I think we have enough people here to just kind of get your bearings, because we want you to come away with something from this. Now, we've got a broad audience, so it's going to be a tough stroke to kind of swing, but we're going to give it a go. So one rule we'd like to introduce right at the beginning is if there's something we keep repeating and you have no clue what it is, stop us and ask us, okay? We don't want to do this, I sat there all night and no one told me what that was thing. So we don't want to assume anything. This is a very broad audience. We come from a lot of different backgrounds, so please make it interactive as much as you want to, and stop us along the way. So what about this ng thing? The first time I got into Angular, I'm like, where does this ng come from? It's kind of Angular, ng, but I found out, a little research, that that's the name of the core module inside Angular. And so what you'll see is eventually Angular has these thing called directives, which are like HTML, custom tags, and they all start with ng. So like in Dave's shirt, even the ng jokes, ng repeat is one of their things, eat, sleep, code, ng repeat. So that's kind of the way the code looks, and so everything is ng. That's why they called the conference ng-conf. What was it? It was a conference around AngularJS. Wait, move on. There we go. Two-day course, but it's one track. It wasn't one of these where you break up. Everyone goes through the same session for 2 solid days.
2 long days.
Very long days. The nice thing is, and you'll see at the end, all of the presentations were recorded and are online. So you guys can go back and do the whole conference yourself if you have 16 hours to sit there and watch YouTube. But it was actually excellent. There's a whole bunch of topics, and we're going to just kind of do a 10,000-foot view and fly over all of them, and we can dig into ones you want to. It was the first week of March. It was in Salt Lake City. I'd never been. I don't think Dave had been either. And they have these things, if you're just from the Midwest like me, they have these really tall things called mountains. And they're really cool. And we had a lot of fun. There were about 800 on site, but the cool thing was that they also had satellite locations that you could sign up for. If you go to their website, it's still up there. If you click on the extended site, they were worldwide. They even linked into a couple of them. There was one from Romania that they linked into, and they were like 2 in the afternoon at the 8 o'clock session or whatever the time frame was. They're like, we're going to be here till 3 in the morning. And they're like, yeah. And they were all in a conference room. And I'm like, okay, cool, go for it. So it was really neat because they really worked on including everyone, even those that couldn't travel to the conference. So even some of our folks on some of our teams tuned in to certain sessions and listened in and tried to spy on us, make sure we were there. Pretty cool. Right. So there were some themes in the conference, and one of them that was really big that stood out to me was that, you know, Google is the core manager contributor of AngularJS, but they really wanted to make sure that the Angular community is embracing not only other technologies, but other people. And so they had mentioned throughout the conference that they had worked with the Ember team, which is another JavaScript framework, and learned lessons from the Ember team and included those into some of the newer versions. There's this whole topic. They had come up with this AdScript, which is a JavaScript, a typed JavaScript kind of dialect, I guess, that Google had come up with, which was very similar in alignment with something called TypeScript, which is a Microsoft-sponsored thing. And believe it or not, Google and Microsoft got together, coordinated on it. There's actually a couple talks on this. And they actually have come together to find the best of both worlds. It's going to continue with the name TypeScript, but it's going to go. Dave will have more on that later in the show, but that was really neat. There was also a talk on React, which I'm going to hit on, and how React and Angular can work together, actually, which is interesting. I know Ryan will be interested in seeing that. So the other thing is the community involvement. Every talk talked about get involved. It's all open source, and they're looking for people to be involved, asking questions, doing whatever. So,
and one thing to notice about the conference itself, it's not a Google conference. There's an independent, basically a users group that puts this thing on. Now, they do a heck of a job. There's a lot of people, a lot of the core contributors from the Angular project are there.
Right.
You know, it's professionally done. They do it, but it's really, they're a bunch of volunteers.
Right, and it's not officially done by Google at all. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, again, whoop, sorry. Hold on, back up. Clear. Sorry. So another thing, part of the, we talked about the 2 days, but there was also a pre-conference session that Dave and I both attended. It was 2 tracks, a beginner Angular and an advanced Angular track that we got to go to at the pre-day. So just another little added benefit that we got to have. There were some topics there on animation, advanced directives, and there was this, you can talk to more about what those are, but we can get to those later. So some nice topics. It was a lot of fun. One of the things about Angular is that within the Google world, when they make a release, Angular's focus is superpower of application development or something like this.
It's a super heroic framework.
There we go, super heroic framework. And so the versions always have to be some sort of superpower. So that's what they had, the spectral lobster, and they had some of these characters walking around the whole time at the conference. Unicorn, hydrification, spooky giraffe. And then I got to meet one who I thought was pretty cool because he was taller than I am. I got to meet the wizard, who is Wizard Props, who is a 9-foot-some wizard who wandered around, and he was pretty cool. So
He looks kind of old compared to the other one.
he is. He's a lot older.
Yeah.
So there was some fun to it too. I'm not going to go to these links right now. There's some photos out there. We'll share all the links in the slide deck with you afterwards. We also had a ski day, which was really fun for me again, because like I said, you know, mountains. So we got to take this from the top of the mountain, which was really cool. A lot of fun.
It was Snowbird.
Snowbird was where we got to ski, yeah, which is right up there in
That was Saturday after the conference.
Right, they had a group package. If you wanted to stay an extra day, you could do that. So Dave and I did that, and we're still walking. Pretty cool. So let's talk about Angular. What is Angular? We'll give you a little quick intro. It's an open source web application framework. It's maintained by Google, but also community. The purpose is to simplify creation of single-page applications and web applications. So it's based on a model view controller design pattern, and it's currently at the version 1.3.5. I only mention that because we're going to start throwing out version numbers here soon, and so you got to know where it's at today. 1.3.15, 1.4 is in beta, and 2.0 is in alpha. So we'll hit those in a minute. So the strengths of it, the big one is two-way data binding.
Dave, does everybody know what a single page app is? It's kind of critical. But basically, you don't have page points, right? You have one blob of JavaScript that just sits there in the browser and keeps changing, and it goes and directly modifies the DOM until things happen the way you want them.
Right.
As opposed to new pages being served.
Right. It's different from the traditional web page where every click paints the entire page. Instead, you're painting small content pieces of the page and keeping it all alive. Most of the web-based email, whether you use Google or Gmail or Yahoo or those types of things, are basically the kind of example of a single page. Normally nowadays, every click doesn't repaint that whole page. You'll just click over here and it'll just refresh your email list, or it'll bring up an email. That's a single page app kind of example. There's one of the other things is some of the JavaScript frameworks are not as cooperative with other frameworks. jQuery actually is built into Angular to some degree. There's a light version of jQuery for part of it, but also you'll see later on, like this one presentation, he actually used in one page, he had Angular, and then his other React framework, he inserted that into the middle of the page, and Angular and kind of cooperates with those, so that's a strength. One of the things, do you know what the DOM, everyone knows what the DOM is? The object model behind the browser, and that it decouples some of that DOM manipulation like that you do in jQuery, where you have to go and find the objects and that sort of thing. It kind of tries to decouple that, give you easier methods to get at that. And it has a large library of all kinds of these directives that can help you do all these things, and they all start with ng. There are some challenges with the current version. One of the things is because of the two-way data binding, there's this thing called the digest, and that's what keeps track of everything. And when you change this over here, this thing's going to change over here. Well, it has to kind of constantly keep checking what's changed, what's different, what's changed, what's different. Sometimes in some of your bigger apps, that can end up consuming a lot of time in the browser. So that's one of the challenges we'll see later on is being addressed by some of the newer versions. It's a pretty steep learning curve because of some of the nomenclature and some of the approach. There's a lot. It's not a quick sit down and you can do a couple small things pretty quickly, and then you hit kind of a wall where there's some concepts you have to swallow in order to really understand it and work with it well. And sometimes it's not the best choice for every web app. One of the talks they talked about, you know, if you're going to build like an online game in the browser or something, it's not the best fit because of that performance issues and stuff like that. So the first thing they talked about was 1.4. It's the next thing coming out. What have they done to make it better soon? Because 1.4 is coming out pretty quickly here. One thing that they've done is the router. Now, just to catch everybody up, the router is the kind of the element of a JavaScript or even a web framework that routes you from page to page or from element to element, changes the URL or talks back to the REST interface, whatever that's happening. The router in Angular is pretty immature. It was put in early on and it really hasn't been updated very much. And what happened is in the user community is another router became very popular that was outside of that space called UI router. That became very popular. So they haven't done a lot with the router. There's this new version called Angular 2.0 that's coming. And in that Angular 2, they really wanted to work on the router, so there's a lot of talks out there. There was an NG Europe conference, and out there they talked a lot about the router. They talked a lot about the design of that. And I'll have a link to the presentation for that. And anyway, in that design, they said, we want to get people to this sooner. So they've actually built it so that that same router syntax will work in 1.4. And so you can start using the new router syntax. There's a lot of advantages to it. There's improved internationalization in 1.4. There's this new ng-animate set of widgets that can animate, you know, scrolling, roll-ons, all kinds of effects. There's a whole library of animations that work with, you can just add a little bit of CSS and it does some pretty cool animation stuff. There's changes in ng messages, which is the home messaging architecture. And there's a lot of other new features or stuff you can, like I said, we're going to stay at the 10,000 foot view. I'd love to dive into each one of these, but here's some of the big deals that they made a big deal about. One is this digester under 1.4 is about 30% faster, which is a huge improvement. And they did a few demos of that. That was pretty cool. Little increase in memory footprint, so it's a little smaller, but they're focusing in the 1.4 to have very few breaking changes so that when you upgrade to it, your code doesn't break. And they're keeping the same list of supported browsers that they have under 1.3, so that you don't have to knock browsers off your list if you have to support older browsers.
This is IE9, right?
IE9 is the big one that they'd love to. Yeah, there was discussion about.
One we'd like to get rid of.
Yeah, wouldn't we all? But moving on. So let's talk a little more about this new router. It's the ng-route, like I said, is a very simple implementation. ng-route connects to this other tag called ng-view, which is like the content that's going to be connected. Please.
Can you explain what the routers do and why they're so?
You want to take that one? I can kind of give you concepts, but I don't have something practical to show.
Yeah, so say in our app we have a search page, and the URL that you would look at it says search/all. This search page that shows all the results. If I go to the next tab, it goes search/books, right? So it's just the book content. Well, when you click that link and go there, you're causing a state change in the app. It's a single page app, so the URL changing isn't because you're getting a new page, it's because the state internal of that JavaScript app is changing, and now this piece of code behind there says, oh, I want to go to this state, so I'm going to take this section, I'm going to swap out this view that was there already, I'm going to swap in another view that's there, and then do some magic to hook up some data and stuff. And so the router is kind of hooks up the views. It's a state machine basically that kind of brings the views along for the ride as the state of the app moves through. So you go from page to page to page, it kicks views out. It can swap. The UI router is cool just because you can use multiple views for kind of given page. So it's kind of the heart of the whole thing.
Right.
What drives it.
And it's tied into the model view controller pattern that it has, so that those routes trigger typically what's called a controller, which will set up the data model and then connect that into what you're going to show on the view. Does that help?
Well, yeah,
I know
it's
you're
very important to understand.
Yeah, it is. It's a critical piece, and so.
And it's important enough that we spent 2-3 weeks changing our router from the stock router to the UI router, and then now they say, oh, we got this new one you can use.
But the good thing is they're also working on a migration path, not only from the old router to the new, but also from UI router to the new one. So someday we'll have that, you know, we'll be current, right? So basically, I've hit some of the first points here. Actually, I hit the talk about the UI router as well, and about the need for 2.0. I kind of jumped into this slide when I was on the other slide. So let's talk about here. Sorry, I lost my place. So we have this, they call it ng new router, but that's big difference in the name there. But they use this ng-view ports, and what Dave said, one of the strengths of the UI router was to integrate multiple of these views. It was very limiting under the standard router that you can only have one view. Now you can nest them and do some fancy stuff. I know UI router does some of that. This model will also support that.
Picture Gmail, you know, on the left you have a detail or like a list of folders and all that stuff. That could be one view, and then on the right side you have the detail like a list of all your emails from that folder. That's another view, and so you can manage those both in the same app. And then now you click one of those, it turns into the mail view, the mail view. Right. And that's another view that gets routed, that gets swapped in when you go into that new state.
One of the things I found interesting about this is something called lifestyle hooks, which are basically points before when it comes in and it receives a request for a new view. It has checkpoints. When the old view is going to go out, it can check and say, are you ready to move away from this view? Is this view initialized? Does this view have all the data it needs to move forward? So the examples they showed, one was when we have the situation where a user's on a form entering data and they decide to go forward, and then you want to stop them and say, wait, you didn't enter this required field. So these lifestyle hooks will allow you to stop, say, hey, put up the message box, you need to enter your email before going forward, whatever the message is. And another example they had with those is making sure someone's authenticated through the login screen. And if they're not, these lifecycle hooks can stop them and prompt for a login, take a different path through the application because of these different hooks, instead of having to build all of that architecture yourself. So I think that's all I had on the router. So we're going to move into the next version. Woohoo! The other day.
There you, Dave.
And Angular 2.0.
So Angular 2 is a brand new project. So people like me who have been studying the heck out of Angular 1 for the last 2 years, it's like great. I bought probably 10 books, and companies paid for trainings, and it's like, okay, now here we go. It's completely new. It has its own GitHub repo and its own website. An interesting. Do I dare go to the website?
Click it. See what happens. You're on this boat.
Oh boy,
to the right.
All right, forget the website. Anyway,
here, I'll get you there. You do some talking.
Who's got an Angular or a Android phone with Lollipop on it? Or actually. So if you've seen they have that new flat look. Actually, all the Gmail apps and everything have that new flat look, kind of with the buttons hanging with gray. Yeah. Okay. So here we go.
You use the mouse and scroll it.
Yeah.
The mouse probably go better than the pad.
Oh, thank you. Quick start. I had this plan. Blah blah blah. Oh, we don't want that. So this is a new Angular. I'm looking at the wrong thing. This is the new Angular website.
Oh, you wanted to go to that?
Yeah, what I was looking for is the material design one. So since I'm here anyway. Oh, that was okay. That link is the
wrong link.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Return. Okay. So it's a brand new repository, brand new website. They're actually tracking traffic. So this is one of the big takeaways from the show, is that NG Europe pretty much freaked everybody out because they said 2.0 is coming, forget everything you know, we're going to start over. And people went, bleh. They've kind of come around to the fact that people don't want to have to retool everything, and have said, okay, well, let's start thinking migration paths. Let's start thinking, how do we move slowly into this? And part of it is they got a brand new website. So instead of mixing Angular 1x and 2x, they have two different websites, and they're tracking traffic to them. And the traffic is going to kind of encourage them to go wherever people are using the product, they're going to go there. So once 1x starts to drop off in 20 years, they'll maybe stop working on Angular 1 features. In the meantime, they've committed to 1.4. It should be out, like, if it isn't already, it should be out soon. And 1.5, and there's a few more down the roadmap. But they're also working on 2.0. 2.0 is still in beta. You can play with it, but it's still kind of a work in progress. Whoa. Boy, this is really okay. The biggest thing that I heard coming out of this show, or one of the biggest, was TypeScript. And if you like strongly typed languages and you hate JavaScript, this is good stuff. If you like JavaScript, because it doesn't have those stupid types, you're going to hate it. But basically, TypeScript is it should be ES5. So we live in JavaScript land here. Yes, ES5, basic JavaScript. This is the standardized version.
What's ES, Dave?
Oh, ECMAScript, which is the standardized version of JavaScript. So ES5 is what we know and love today. ECMAScript 6 is the next version of JavaScript. It's the new standard that's being supported now, kind of. And TypeScript is a wrapper around that. And the nearest analogy I can say is, think of C, and then think of C++. So it's C with objects. Well, this is JavaScript with objects. And it was, as Dave said, it was a Microsoft thing. They started working on this years ago. Their Visual Studio tooling and everything handles it. And now, because we have strong types, you can do a lot of cool stuff in your IDEs and things. They have engines that do syntax analysis, where you can do command completions and things. WebStorm kind of does that now on JavaScript, but it really doesn't know what you're asking, right? You hit control space and it says, well, here's something that I think I saw on that page over there, and it tries to pull it in and show it to you. It doesn't really know, but with types it knows because it says, oh, I need a method that's on this class. There's parsing engines that go along with TypeScript that allow things like Sublime Text and like WebStorm's got it built in, where you can do tooling. So that's this stuff here. This will run on modern browsers with shims. So there's these libraries that you can do it two ways. You can have the library compile it on the fly. So basically, the ES6 TypeScript will compile down to that, or you can run a browser that uses that. I think I got pictures later. This is really the hardest thing.
The arrows actually work better on the keypad. No.
Got it. Okay. So Angular 2 production build. So the interesting thing here is Google is building Angular 2 in TypeScript. They are going to distribute it after transpiling. And transpiling is taking the JavaScript of form X and just running it through a translator into. So when you get Angular 2 code in ES5, it's actually a transpiled version. It's ugly, but it works and it's correct because the types are there. I mean, it started out with a correct, strongly typed thing, and basically it's just being converted into regular JavaScript. Let's see, arrow. Google used to, as Dave said, Google used to say that, they have this @script, which is basically ECMAScript with types. At the conference, they made this announcement, @script with TypeScript. So Microsoft wins. So this is the tracer. This is Google's transpiler to support older browsers. Really, I think the best way to do that is probably, I don't know how many of you do JavaScript development, but we have tooling that takes our JavaScript and pipes it through, does minification and combines it all into different pieces. It takes our templates and turns it into JavaScript. So the tooling, all that tooling exists now. The things they were saying is that this is all optional. You don't have to use it. The browsers will continue to support the older JavaScript. Angular will still run with the older JavaScript. This new stuff is all, you can use it or you don't have to. There is a way of debugging it. You can debug it in the browser using ES5 source maps, where you'll see the ES6 stuff on the screen, but really behind the scenes you'll be looking at the ES5, or it'll be executing the ES5 code. So that's basically, they're trying to not give you a reason not to like it, right? So I thought this was interesting. So they start out with TypeScript, Angular written in TypeScript. They run it. You can either use it if you have a browser that supports TypeScript natively, which they don't. I think there might be some developer beta things not quite yet. You run it through Tracer, that's their transpiler. You end up with, well, they're Dart at Google, so they're talking about Dart here too. But basically it turns into JavaScript here. Then you can output that, so it builds, abstract syntax trees of language. And it says, oh, now let's run them into one of these converters. So it either outputs ES5, ES6, or TypeScript. And so that's how Angular is built and packaged for consumption. The newer
Angular showing, Dart being an alternative to JavaScript, actually, because of the TypeScript source, it's starting there and actually produces both the Dart and the JavaScript versions out of the same code base.
And their plus to that was it's strongly typed, so you run into less gotchas. I mean, they've noticed that since they've started developing with typed code, their error rate's gone down. Things are better, and when it compiles into ES5, it still works because it's just those classes turned into JavaScript.
Ryan?
Sure.
Was there a lot of buzz about Dart?
Not much. I don't know what it is really, but they didn't mention it. They said it was still going. They're not dropping it. There was still some discussion about it, but nothing, no.
Right. There was a little talk about in the keynotes about when they talked about the cooperative with Ember and with others, that they also have talked with the Dart people, and actually, especially with this TypeScript model where they're sharing code amongst them, that they're working closely with the Dart group. They're not ignoring them, and they kind of know where their space is and where the Dart space is, and they kind of are working together, not against each other. So that's about all they really mentioned, about one or two talks.
So now that we get into the features of Angular 2, so the classic Angular app has controllers, which bind, so you have a view, which is a piece of HTML generally. You have a controller that binds a view. You have the router, which takes the view and the template and makes them show up at certain times. And then you have these services, which are, what do you call it? They're singletons. They live for the life of the application, and you use them to store state that's persists for the life of the app. Or we generally use them to make calls to HTTP things. But that's kind of the food chain at that point. Well, Angular 2 gets rid of controllers because it's going to these web components, similar to React. I don't know a lot about React, but that's how they described it. It adds 3 different kinds of directives to replace a whole bunch of other pieces. Where we have a component directive that's a piece of code that allows you to create a new, create this piece on a DOM where there's a bunch of stuff living behind it. We'll show you that in a little bit. A viewport where the directive just contains other views, and this decorator, which is kind of like a simple, I just want to take this piece of data and turn it into something else. But they were kind of saying, we're rethinking this whole, and one of the talks there was pretty entertaining if you're an Angular programmer, because it made fun of how they have strangely named things like the filter. Just weird names that just come up because you don't plan it that way, but it ends up being the filter, and this is probably not in the right place, but this is what a piece of ES6 looks like. It kind of looks like Java. Import. So here's all your libraries. You have annotations to do things. Obviously, taking Angular Fire, which is a database, and binding it to my, the URL there, and giving it some sort of selector. A lot of these things are driven by selectors in. The template specifies what, where the HTML comes from, and here's a class with a constructor, and so this is like strongly typed. This is JavaScript, and if you're into the Wild West, it's not something you're gonna like, but it adds a lot of order in. So more features. No two-way data binding. So one of the cool things in Angular 1 was hey, look, I typed this in here and it just pops up there because of the two-way data binding. Well, that's gone because there's they're trying to go to this one-way data flow. It takes everything from, you take a click event, it propagates through this, it goes in one direction, and I'm not sure how it's going to work. I mean, I'm not an expert at this stuff, but the idea is you want to run the digest loop once. You only want to check status once instead of the old Angular would loop through the entire system up to 10 times before it gave up. So this is something else that I wish I had more time to learn about, was this whole concept of observables. They were talking about observables, and I think we have a little slide up here, so I'll leave that. Web components, if you're into web things at all, you need to go look at webcomponents.org because it's kind of the future. It's really interesting. We'll show a little bit about that, but I like this guy's thing here. Angular 2 doesn't seem like a framework, but a library that sits on top of the web standard. So it I think kind of does it because you're using all these DOM things and just kind of hooking them together and letting it run. So then a new 1.4 router, which is what Dave was talking about. No scope. So yeah. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So
got a lot of applause.
yeah, scope is this thing that shows up in controllers, and if those controllers go away, scope goes away. But it was this kind of thing that everybody hung stuff on. So there's ways of mitigating that in your current code. Real modules, so there's this new module thing in ES6 that is just a standard. You get a lot better error messages in the template expression. So one of the most fun things to do is sit and try to figure out why it just doesn't work. There's no error. One of the philosophies of Angular is that if something bad happens, don't tell me it. Don't tell me because you don't want to break the app. So unless it absolutely can't keep going, it just stops. Or unless it can't, it just keeps going and you don't know why. So here they're going to have things turn on error messages that have some intelligence in them. They're making a big push for internationalization. The libraries that are out now are okay. There's going to be a standard way of doing things. They actually showed some neat accessibility things too by just adding a library. All of a sudden, you can identify things automatically show up as the things that the screen readers need, and with a little bit of hinting in the HTML, you get a lot of that for free. Filters are these little tiny, generally little tiny pieces. You might use them to uppercase a word, or it's kind of a utility you would drop in all over the HTML, and these are replaced by formatters, which do basically the same thing. And there's this dependency injections, which is kind of one of the keys to the old Angular, where before you can use a service, before you can use some resource, you have to inject it at the top. It has to come in. You have to know about it beforehand. And that allows you to do cool things because you can, when you're testing, you can stub out all the services that get injected. This will all be done using annotations, so that hence that Java-ish code. So the migration is a big, training doc books. Okay, so what do we do? You can start writing ES6 now. You can start. I mean, I tried hooking it up, but I got some parts to work. I didn't get WebStorm to work. I mean, I was just hoping, wouldn't it be cool if I could show that? So there's people that are using it now, and there's stuff on GitHub where people are using it, and so it's there. You can use all the gulp and grunt tool chain stuff is there. You can set that up by using the new router. That gives you your app the framework where it kind of makes the control, and that in combination with this allow you to write your controllers so that they're more they're less scopy. That was the thing we're getting rid of, and then more they look like an object with this. And I think I got some sample code here. Special syntaxes for directives, blah blah. Once you write the ES6 versions with the new syntax for Angular 1 migration, it's easy. Their goal was don't have to do it overnight. You can start with the router and then gradually migrate your stuff over or new things would be written with the new setup. Old things could be gradually refactored as you go through stuff normally. So here's a service, right? Can everybody see that pretty much? So here's what a service looks like. So this declares the Angular module. It's dependent modules. Modules are big groups of stuff. So this requires the unicorn module. And probably because we're injecting a service called unicorn horn into our service, which is unicorn height. And we're also having this thing called $Q, which is the promise service that JavaScript promises for synchronization. So you were injecting these two into this service function and doing some dissing and doing a lot of binding. There's a lot of parentheses. And then we end up horn thrusting and I don't know what. So anyway, you look at that and you say, okay, there's a bunch of things. We look here, and this is that same service. So you can kind of see this is maybe Angular module stuff. Service here. But now this is different because now this is a class. And it has a constructor with the thing you're injecting with the $Q service. Now I save this to this, which seems reasonable. And there's this new kind of cool syntax which gets JavaScript's got this weird behavior with this and this also affects that. So kind of the same. And then you go to kind of the same, but it looks more like a class, right? And then you go to Angular 2, and now kind of the same. Now this is kind of interesting. I took a picture of that because that's a type, and WebStorm doesn't know what to do with that because I don't have that set up. But this is strongly typing that constructor to say, here's a variable unicorn horn I'm injecting the service. It needs to be of type this. So there's your strong typing failing. But this is TypeScript. Yeah, this is TypeScript. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. This should be TypeScript up at the top there. Should have had to Okay, so that's part of the migration track. That's what I mentioned before. They're really serious about keeping the 1X series going. So people that are using 1X will have updates. 2X is going now. Their first production team project, they're starting to eat their own dog food. So one of the cloud service control panels or something is now underway. They're converting all their Angular 1 code to Angular 2. So I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of things happening there. So here's some technologies that they're using, HTML templates. Whatever. There's a lot of stuff here. The thing that I thought was kind of cool that I never knew about. So this is the Polymer Project. That's Google's web component thing. There's webcomponents.org, which has like all of them. This is a specific project for that. So this is in the material design. If you click things, the button kind of shimmers and pushes the stuff to the outside, kind of like you're tapping a piece of paper. And this is kind of one of the philosophies behind material design. It should look like I have this thing and I'm pushing it and waving, right? Kind of like what Apple started to do, skeuomorphism. But let's take a look at that. Uh-oh.
Drag it over.
Yep.
You can maximize it at that point.
Okay, so here's our paper ripple. There's this thing here called shadow root. This is what they're calling the shadow DOM. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I don't want to have this maximized because I want to actually see what we're. Okay. Oh, I'm going to really mess this up, dude.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
Figure it out.
All right. So, inspect. Okay. So you can see as I wave over it on the left and the right side. So if you open, this is in the settings. You can go and turn this on. But if I open the shadow root, this is a part. So basically, if you would use jQuery and try to look at this stuff, it does not exist. It can only see stuff that's out here.
They call that the light DOM versus the shadow DOM.
Right.
So that's the new
Outside of-
terminology. That the light DOM is the DOM we're used to now, and they put the shadow DOM in there.
But you can see that there actually is stuff here. So I can look at this. Here's the background. Here's the waves. And now when I click this, you see how it changes? The opacity style changes, and it's part of the animation. And this div gets changed because there's something moving on it, right? So things are happening. It's just the DOM, the light DOM is not reflecting it. So this is a component. This stuff all happens behind the scenes. Your button just does its thing, and there's communication with styles, there's communication with events between the shadow space and the light space, but it's all very controlled. And this is kind of where it smells like a lot of web design is going. Because it allows you to build components. I mean, it's something we've been, in Angular 1 was pretty good about that. You had directives and there are components you can drop in and they work for the most part, but this is real components where there's real isolation between parts, and it's pretty cool. So anyway, that's,
Sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
No.
Are they combining the Angular and Polymer project?
No, I believe they're kind of they're just different, right? Polymer is a bunch of web components.
Polymer is a way to do web components.
Right. But the web component that they end up with are standard. There's a standard for web components. So there's Polymer. There's gobs of them on GitHub. You know, you can just get web components there. If you go to webcomponents.org, there's different people building them. And supposedly this, remember that one quote, he says it's web standards with, you know, just hanging on each other. The idea is to make any web component that conforms to the web component standard work in Angular. So you shouldn't have to use an Angular web component. So that's what they say. So that's our little shadow DOM demo. This is interesting, but this just kind of describes the structure of an application. It's got this tree hierarchy and basically events flow from top to bottom. And this is how they're getting their speed changes, and there's a bunch of stuff in here. But change detection was a huge thing, and by saving 5% in change detection, they could save seconds in the execution of the app. And that speed is really important, especially on mobile devices, because the process, I mean, you run on your desktop, you got 6 processors you run, you don't care. But on a phone where you don't have a lot of memory, it really makes a difference. This is they were talking about observables. Observables are these, smells to me almost like a socket where you grab it and you attach things to it. And then a data stream starts and messages come out and things happen. And it just seemed like a really cool, I was hearing the talk and kind of visualizing things that we could do with it. And I've been reading up on it a little bit, and it's not easy, but it does look pretty cool. And I think that a lot of plumbing is going to do that. Like so things like YouTube video viewers and things. This seems like a good fix for that. The other thing that we've been kind of playing with this, and there was a couple of talks there on style guides, and one of the big problems we have is there's a bunch of teams working on code, and how do you kind of manage what's happening with the different code? So
one of the big pain points too of Angular 1 is that there's multiple ways to do a lot of the basic tasks. There's not just a standardized way, and so there's a whole lot of styles out there of how to solve problems, and the style guides try to address that, kind of in line with the upgrade of the language itself to in 2.0, they're trying to have one way to do each particular type of common task. That's one of their goals. But on the same side, they're trying to enforce the style guides, so they come out at the beginning and say, we're going to do it this way. Because in the old Angular way, one way came out and someone came out with a different way to do it, and these little camps developed, well, I like it this way, I like it that way, and all that.
But they haven't said tabs or spaces, how many columns.
Where do you put your curly brace?
They're leaving that to the user. Yeah, good luck with that. So these so there's these style guides, and there's 2 of them. One of the 2 standard ones are Papa's and Todd Motto's. And so this is just an example of one of the guys in our team, Joel, took it and turned it into basically the stuff he liked from each one and combined them. It's still a large document. There's a lot of pieces in it because there's a lot of ways you can go wrong. One way I started to do this is say, okay, well, let's come up with these are the 4 basic components in an Angular app. Let's come up with archetypes, examples of how to do things. Because one of the big problems is you get somebody in there who hasn't, maybe new to the team or something, and they say, oh, this looks like what we need, let's grab it. Here's a service, let's grab it. Well, maybe that's a service that we wrote when we first started the project, and it's the worst thing ever, and I'd like nothing better than to kill it. But now they've taken it and duplicated it. So the goal was to try to say, hey, if you're going to start with something new, take that one and now modify it. And then here's a test suite that's got, maybe not everything, but most of what you need. Because the setup is different for tests, for controllers and services and things, but they're all pretty much the same. So you could at least get some mileage out of that, and that would enforce your style and kind of give them a hint, this is the right way to do things. The issue is you got to create them. Those files don't exist because I haven't done them yet. You have the team use them. If they don't exist, they can't use them. And if they don't use them, then what's the point of doing it? And you must maintain them because you say, oh, this is a great way of doing this. We should change that. If you never change the archetype now, people are making new stuff using the old standard or the old thing. So there's some work involved, but it's kind of style guide seems like a good idea. So this is you, I think. I know nothing about
it. And I don't know a ton more about this, but we're kind of, after talking about Angular 1.4 new stuff, talking about Angular 2.0 and the new stuff, we're kind of decided to kind of just pick and choose what other talks or topics just hit us, as and I know Dave talked about the Shadow DOM, and there was a lot of talk about that, these other things. I know React is another popular JavaScript framework, and they had this talk where the guy just combined the 2 and gets great speed out of your app, and it was a pretty neat thing. So he built this project and had this large table. It's a calendaring project where they have to take every day, it's 31 by 24, so it was every hour for a whole month, and display the availability in each of those hour slots, basically was his thing. And so he had this display, and he's like, how fast can we paint this particular display? And he said, well, he did it in Angular 1, and it was slow. And I'm going to actually show you the videos here, because it really, you have to see this to see it. It's pretty cool. It has a lot of the ng-repeat, which is basically the for loop that sits inside of HTML that Angular uses, and they had this repeated multiple times for rows and columns, as you would for a typical table. And he had whatever the math is, 3124, it has 744 cells or something like that he had to paint every time they painted the page. A lot. And so he inserted React into just the section that painted the table. And I'll show you the video here to kind of give you the flavor of how fast it is. So, come on. He was struggling with how slow it was, and I'm struggling with my bandwidth right now. Come on. Why is it during a demo? Always. This ran great before you guys came. Let's try to start it back up. You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, try to refresh.
Yeah. It is slow, very slow, yeah. All right.
Plug it by accident?
Okay. Okay, so that kind of spoils it because that shows you the good at the end before the other. But, all right, so he was struggling. He restarts his server in the middle of this thing, and then he shows it, and it does seem really slow. So, okay, epic fail here. The truth is, the other one comes in like this, like popcorn, whereas the React one, as you see, much quicker, and of course. Do they turn our internet off at night here at Follett or something? Oh, wait.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah, maybe they are. So I might take Dave's advice here and maybe restart the session, see what we get. Just for one more quick try. Come on. All right. As you see, it's kind of popcorn. So yeah, so he's going into the detail of that, but I wanted to show you that piece. But the interesting thing was he gets toward the end of his talk, and I thought that this was actually interesting, and it actually did impress the entire crowd, is so he gets to the end of his talk here. So as you can tell from the response, the audience was like, wow. So if you look at that and with the React in between, there's an improvement from the Angular 1 into the React, but then the improvement from Angular 1 to Angular 2 is just, yeah. But a lot of that has to do with what Dave went over, which is that whole eliminating that digest cycle and those repetitive loops that they often get caught in, and which I know are very challenging to go in and debug, try to figure out why is my digest continue to refire over and over again. And there's tricks and ways to work around it under 1.0, but they're challenging to figure out. So anyway, that was one of the topics that I just found very impressive during the conference.
So these are my takeaways. If you're using JavaScript, you might consider using the ECMAScript 6 and the TypeScript, because kind of the way things are going. All your new code should look forward, so you're using you're writing Angular especially. We have to find out what we can do now to prevent pain later, and migrating old code and structure would be good too. Keep up with new features, because observables, okay, sounds great, might be stupid, but there's a lot of new stuff that comes up and you can't not look at it. WebComponents is really useful.
that. I mean, it seems to be working, but that's another thing that you should watch. And use 1.x because it's a pretty good way to write an app, and keep your eye on 2.0. Go back to this, a library on top of web standards. So hard to not like that. What else we got? So we got some resources, the ng-conf website schedule, which has a list of all the sessions. The YouTube channel for that.
They actually have a playlist on YouTube with all the sessions in order, so you can just drill right down through them. It's pretty nice.
This material design is the lollipop Android thing with the buttons, like I showed you, with the things that shimmer and cars and all this stuff. And they're promoting that as a user interface standard, or applying theming and that kind of things for Angular apps, which is cool if you like that. And then this was the WebComponents thing in NG Europe that was highly recommended at the conference to try to understand WebComponents. So there's a lot of stuff out there to teach you things. So if you got like 20 hours, have at it. And that's about it. So, any questions?
That was our, yeah, go ahead.
Saw the 2.0 code versus the older code. Beyond, of course, going to TypeScript.
Yeah.
And all that. You actually see the improvement in productivity.
I don't think enough developers have actually used it. I mean, it's the ones we saw, they were typing stuff and they were actually building code, and it looked cool because they had all the tools set up. So you could do completion. That one guy with he had annotations, so you type in the annotation and then basically would fill in stuff and you could type. I mean, they were doing coding on the fly. That was with TypeScript.
No Visual Studio 5.
Yeah, right. But it's, I guess the point is that all this tooling is available for this new way of doing it. Now, as far as Angular itself, it's still we're not using it in any production. I'm just kind of playing with it in my spare time at this point. And even Google isn't using it in production yet. I mean, that was their statement, was they will begin working on Angular 2, migrating their apps to Angular 2 like now. So
Angular 2 is still it's marked as an alpha. The Angular 1.4 is at release candidate 0 right now, so it's gone through 6. I think I saw 6 beta releases, and then it's now on release candidate 0. So I'm not sure when they'll officially call it released, but sure.
If I like writing apps using drugs or Spring, why should I start looking at what have you guys found attractive about it? What power does it do? What additional capabilities? Why is it cool?
What I like about it is it moves more of the user. Sorry, Siri. Shut up. I must have leaned on the Siri's button there. So sorry, Siri.
Bad Siri.
So thank you for Siri. What I like about it, we actually have the app that I work on right now is basically all in one code base, has a Angular single page app approach piece to it, which was originally built specifically for the mobile device, and then has an incredibly thick and complex, what we call the traditional desktop side of the application, which is a struts, JSP, tiles, servlet, backend heavy side. And what's nice when we get over to the Angular side is you can move some of that user interface stuff out to the browser and not have to constantly travel back and forth to the back end. You can bring your screens down to components instead. In the back end, pretty much every click is a repaint of that entire menu structure gets regenerated, and then your core content gets regenerated. Now they've started taking some Ajax and some jQuery and trying to inject it in there to modernize that approach. But Angular gives you a lot of that right out of the box. It's kind of designed to allow you to build an app that way, the more modern browser-based application that we've started to become accustomed to. It's the tooling that'll let you do that compared to the tooling that's really more built to have a long extended conversation with the back end versus little snippets of conversation with the back end to get the data you need and then let the browser format and manipulate that data in the front end.
You're not done creating endpoints and doing database, tuning your databases and all this other. You still have to do design, but the UI just kind of hooks into it. And there's a lot, and the good thing that's really good with Angular is because it's supported by Google, and I think Microsoft's kind of bought into it a little bit now too. I mean, there's big players behind it. There's a lot of people using it.
Yeah, they noted that PayPal, most of the PayPal forms are built in Angular, and they had a tweet about something that they upgraded or something.
A lot of activity on GitHub. There's all kinds of little goofy projects, components. So it's really a good place to be if you're into that.
Try to complete that answer. Probably important to emphasize that a framework like Angular Angular runs so you still need some kind of backend to send paper.
Sure, right.
And now, if you want to have it in JavaScript, JS,
Right.
they haven't mentioned.
Any talk of Node during the I didn't hear anything specifically touted about it, but I
used it all the time.
Yeah,
that's
you would,
all the tooling is built on. So Grunt and Gulp, all that stuff that you use to transpilers are all written in Node. So
yeah.
I mean, they use it for everything. But as far as writing backends, I guess it's not really the focus because the focus is on backend or front end.
Right. So, but yeah.
We're not going to get through it.
Yep. Other questions? We have more time, so feel free to.
So you backed by Google, you guys have no fear that most of them are bad in place.
They're eating their own dog food. So if this was just a test project, well, right.
True.
And there's no guarantee, but there's no guarantee about anything really in this business. Everything is obsolete in a year, so
yeah.
At least this one, you bet on a horse and you hope that it keeps going.
Right.
I mean, they could drop Angular 2 tomorrow and say it's not. Our pilot project completely didn't work. We're dumping it. So if Angular 1 we have running code now we could just deal with. Even if Google dropped it, it's all open source. It's all on GitHub. So even if Google dropped it, there'd still be people working on it now, not the paid people that they get with Google. It's there. You don't lose control of the frame. You have all the code. So there's worse things to try. Yeah,
they could do some of things.
sure. But you're in a lot better shape when you have all the code than if it's some proprietary thing. It disappears one day and your server goes down because you don't have any of the code.
Oh.
I don't know if you have a lot of time. I know we've used that on different different. I'm just wondering how in productivity once you've got it.
Yeah, the learning curves. I mean, we did have training. John Lindquist is one of the big dogs in training for Angular. He's got the egghead.io website, which is all the training videos. He came in and did a training here for about 15 people. That was helpful. I've been reading every 15 books. I mean, it's worth to ramp up on it, but really and this was kind of my first, before I got in this project, it was kind of my first foray into JavaScript. I mean, JavaScript at all. Never worked even on, and it was reasonably easy to pick up. I mean, there's it's programming, so once you get over the JavaScript type thing, well, you don't have to do that. And there's fun tools to play with. So I think in the WebStorm's help, it's got a even as bad as it is, the completion does help. I think it's reasonably productive. I don't have a lot to compare it to, but I mean, we were on other projects where to take a form and change things took 6 recompiles on the server side. We got to rebounce JBoss, and every time you deploy a piece. I know there's tools probably now to mitigate that, but there's a lot of waste of time. Whereas here, it's like change a few things in HTML. Oh, let's fix this. Refresh. Okay, works.
And that's the kind of things I was looking at.
Yeah.
A little seemingly productivity. I know there's some type of way that Angular uses quality for they have their conventions. It's more structured. And a convention, which is good because then you're not. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm interested in. That just we got an idea with things, so I don't mind investing. Yeah, but I have my standard toolbox.
Right.
And it's a tool, do that.
So one of the interesting talks was a couple of people from Google's UI design team talked about using Angular as nothing other than a prototyping engine. So because of the data binding and all this stuff, you can say, okay, here I need they were hosting a list of names. They needed 10,000 names. So they threw it on a server somewhere, and in 20 lines of code or something, they were able to fetch that stuff off the server. They stuff it into a JavaScript object in the service, and then they have an ng-repeat, which just goes through a collection and kicks out a page. And now they were showing these lines of stuff, and they said, oh, what happens if we change the color? And so they started with that, and they have a whole thing that's kind of built out now to allow them to test color schemes. They can load color schemes off the server. They can load images off the server. I mean, for demonstration, somebody says, oh, I don't like that. I want that in purple. They'll just make a change, and then they go out and hit the server again and change it. So there's a lot of use for it, even other than user apps. That's the case for live demo UI stuff. I mean, I was even thinking, right now we use a tool, AxShare or something. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at that going, oh, man, that beats the heck out of AxShare, but you got to know how to program an Angular. So, right.
Yeah.
How many people were at conference?
I think it was about 800 were physically at the conference, and so
Plus the presenters.
right, presenters and all that. But actually, I want to bring it up because it actually impressed me too. Was just the remote.
By the way, don't go to ng-conf.org because something bad comes up.
Oh, really?
It came up with some warning thing.
All right. So I'm in the smaller browser that they changed the interface. Maybe it's under here. There we go. Yeah. So it obviously repeats because there's not 2 Asias on the planet, but it gives you a flavor of where everyone checked in during the conference to do these extended sessions. So it's like we talked about the momentum behind the product. Another thing was this is the second year that they did the conference. The first year, it sold out incredibly fast. I think it was like 45 seconds or something. It was sold out, something ridiculous. And so we got permission before that actual window of opportunity. They had two different windows of opportunity, and we had permission to sign up. And so then we all were staged up 1 o'clock or whatever that day.
Everybody
And
in
we
the
had,
room was.
yeah, we were all trying to hit it, and you know, so we were, you know, fortunate to do that. They didn't do a lottery system like the Google conference does, but they did sell out very quickly, like within minutes or seconds or what, I don't know what it was. But between the two little windows, they only released a few, you know, 100 the first time and then the other 100 or whatever the other time. It sold out very quickly. So, you know, you're talking about the technology, and do you want to adopt the technology? Will it go away? I mean, there's always that possibility, but it seems to have a lot of momentum behind it. But Ryan and I know I've had long talks about all the different JavaScript frameworks and technologies, and it seems like every month or two there's a new one out there to try, and they're always moving fast and they're hard to keep up with. But you know, this one seems to at least have a significant following at this point. Doesn't guarantee that next year at this time we won't be doing a presentation on the next greatest thing that hasn't been invented yet. So.
It's not a great parody image. Like, I think it's on Twitter. Like, you know, one of those like days since we've had an injury at the factory. Like, it's our last JavaScript framework change.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Ours, I think, is at 25. That's when we updated the latest thing.
So.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, guys.